Graham Finley. I'm with Grant Thornton. We're one of the sponsors of the event today. This morning's session, this is the first of two sessions in the approvals and procurement track. This morning's session is going to be an update provided by the Department of Technology around reforms to the state technology approval and procurement process. In addition to that, Jim Butler, who I'm sure you're all familiar with from the Department of General Services, is going to be providing an update on the new IT MSA, which you may also be familiar with. So we're going to have three different speakers. After each speaker, we're going to have some time for questions, and we do encourage questions, so let's try and make this as much of a dialogue as possible. So that's the morning session, and then the afternoon session will be a panel session where we'll be talking about lessons learned and sort of real-life experiences around the state procurement process. And we have, I think, a pretty impressive panel of very experienced state procurement officials who can offer their wisdom. And again, that's going to be a very interactive session. So without further ado, I'd like to start off by requesting Jim to come up and give his presentation. I don't think Jim really needs an introduction. You all know who Jim is. We're very happy to have him, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, it's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm representing the Department of General Services, and I appreciate the invitation. Ann reached out to me and asked if I'd come to talk about our program some. My first experience in working on an IT project, I was at Dell. We were in the middle of implementing Oracle Financials worldwide, Europe, the US, and Asia. And I'd never really been part of a project team before. And the IT lead told this story. He said that at one point he hired like a bona fide rocket scientist to work on an IT project with him. This guy worked at I don't know if it was the Jet Propulsion Lab or one of the NASA labs. And after about 30 days, this rocket scientist came to Curtis, our IT manager, and said, this is harder than rocket science. And maybe some of you can really associate with that. Projects are really hard to do. They're immensely expensive. Our large projects consume up tons and tons of dollars and billions of dollars. And getting them delivered successfully is really, I think it's a heroic accomplishment. And too often projects come under a lot of criticism. I think that's mostly from people who've never really tried to implement one. And a really great, well-executed project, I think, is a thing of beauty. So what does that have to do with procurement? I like to think that procurement should not get in the way of the project. Too often it does. So much of what we're doing at DGS is trying to get procurement out of the way of the project, trying to make procurement the easy part. I like to say it's the tail, it's not the dog, right? We shouldn't work for years to do the procurement. We should be able to get that done fairly quickly and then spend all of our effort on the project. So what are we doing? What have we done to make that easier? Let me talk a little bit for just a moment about roles and responsibilities. DGS is the state's business manager. We buy a lot of things. Some of those have to do with IT, a lot of them don't. So we've had to really work to make sure we have great experts that help us out in our IT procurement. And we did something I think that was really important last year, and that is that for the project procurement, the state, through the work of the governor and the legislature, and through a really great working group consisting of myself and my boss and Carlos Ramos and Anna Brannon and a bunch of volunteers, some of whom are in the room, folks like Michael over at FTB, Michael Banuelos, and others got together. We decided to move the authority to conduct procurements for IT projects out of a generalist department like DGS and move it over to the California Department of Technology. I think that's a really important and critical decision that we made. And it's going to allow the folks that are doing the projects to be close to the folks that are doing the procurement, and hopefully there'll be a lot more coordination and there won't be all this waiting for the procurement to be done. So what does that mean? Well, it's important to think of two separate authorities because we get a lot of questions about, well, who has authority to buy what? There's an IT procurement authority. That's in law. DGS delegates that authority. We actually talk about that as a purchasing authority, okay? We don't talk about it as a delegation, it's a purchasing authority. And DGS grants that to departments based on their capabilities to conduct procurements. Could have to do with training, experience, the size of staff. There's a separate authority which is sometimes confused, and that is IT project delegation. And I'm not the expert on that, but it's essentially driven by SAM Section 4800. This is granted by the Department of Technology, and it's not really related to procurement. It's related to your authority to conduct projects. And just to try to separate the information about those two, there's an easy way to kind of answer the question about who does what. The first question is just ask who's doing the procurement. Well, I should say who has the authority. If your department has the authority to conduct the procurement, it doesn't matter whether it's a project or not a project, or whether it's being oversight or not. You have the authority to conduct the procurement. It doesn't mean you have the authority to conduct the project, okay? And those are separate issues. But if you have the authority from DGS to conduct the procurement, then you get to do the procurement, all right? And that's really important to think about that. And then the second question is, after that, you have to ask, well, has the authority of the project been delegated? Let me show you a flow chart that I think does make this a little simpler. We can get to that. Too happy on the keys there. We recently issued a broadcast bulletin, and this should have come out to all the purchasing authority contacts, as well as the purchasing, contracting officials in the state. Come on, computer. Let's see if this can come up.
It looks like it's
Oh, it's down there. Okay. Is there an IT person in the room? Just messing. Okay, and hopefully you may or may not be able to see it, but essentially you asked this first question. Get up, Mr. Pointer here, or it's not a pointer, is it? You ask, do we have the authority? If we have the authority, then the state agency that has the authority conducts the procurement. Then if you don't have the authority, this is where it gets a little tricky. You ask, is this a reportable project? And if it is not a reportable project, then it will still come back to DGS and we'll conduct the procurement for you. If it is a reportable project, and these are the big ones, these are the fiscals, the 21st century projects. If you don't have the authority because it's such a big spend and it's a reportable project, it's going to go to the State Technology Procurement Division, which is the division that used to be the Technology Acquisitions Branch in DGS, is now at the California Department of Technology. And that's Pete Mastella. He's going to talk a lot about that on our panel today, okay? So this is the simple way to figure out who's going to conduct the procurement. And our departments, DGS and Caltech, have committed to do more communication. We're having a vendor forum. We're inviting all the suppliers in town later on in July to come in and talk about this, and we'll be doing more communication with departments as well. So once you know what's going on in terms of who's doing the procurement, you need to decide what kind of tools you want to use. And these are some tools that we put together to try to help people not to have to do what we would call a traditional RFP process. And sometimes you're just going to have to do an RFP because the projects are very large. But you may not always have to. And there's different channels that you can pursue to figure that out. And all this information is on our website. You're welcome to go look there. I'll share the slide deck with the organizers. They can send it out. There's links on the slides to all the different sections. We have a number of different programs, and there's a slide on each one. I won't go through them. Let me just talk about some of the most important ones. California Multiple Award Schedules, or CMAS program. Who in here has used a CMAS before? Okay, good, a lot of hands. CMAS for IT today is limited to $500,000. We're doing some work on the policy. We hope to raise that limit to take it up to the $1.5 million mark to provide more headroom for CMAS to be used. We also will grant exemptions to that limit from time to time. We're not currently granting any due to workload issues. Is anyone in here involved with Fiscal project? Yeah, we're getting hammered. We are replacing all of our internal systems over the next year with Fiscal. We're part of wave 2. And so we've had to come back on some of the services that we offer. So we're not currently doing exemptions for CMAS, but we will get back to that probably by this time next year. We also have cooperative agreements. These are contracts like WSCA. Anyone here ever used a WSCA contract? Those tend to be primarily for goods, although we are now starting to look at more services. The state of California represents, nationally WSCA sells about a little over $9 billion a year of goods and services required by all the 50 states through those contracts. And California represents about 16% of that volume. We have a really big chunk of the WSCA volume. And it's because those contracts have already been negotiated and bid, and you can just go buy off of them. You don't have to do any additional quoting, which is a really wonderful thing. Graham talked about our ITMSA. That's part of this next category, our master agreements. The ITMSA was recently rebid. People using the ITMSA here. Okay, the dollar limits on the ITMSA have traditionally been up to 1.5 million. We do have allowance for people to go above 1.5 million, depending on your purchasing authority. So I talked earlier about purchasing authority. If you want to go above the 1.5 million, you can apply specific to the ITMSA to go as high as $10 million on the ITMSA. And we have over 150 providers on the ITMSA. It's a really terrific vehicle. And as part of that, you have to actually get 3 quotes. So this is one of those procurement vehicles where you can't just buy. You've actually got to get some quotations. But because you're buying services, you should have already thought about what you want to buy. You should work up a statement of work and actually do some quoting. And we think through that process, you can have a lot of success. And I should add that CMAS also requires 3 quotes. Is anyone annoyed by the fact they have to get quotes on this? You can be honest with me. We're all friends here, right? I hear complaints like, why do I have to get a quote? Hasn't this already been bid by the feds? And we did a study about 2 years ago. We found that California saves an average, not a max, an average of 37% on every CMAS that we buy just by getting the 3 quotes. So we're actually getting a lot better deal than the federal published rates by getting those 3 quotes. We have statewide commodity, the SLP. Anyone here know what the SLP is, Software Licensing Program? You can buy most of the software titles, the major ones that we use, up to $2 million without any, actually you have to get 3 quotes on this one as well. But it makes it a lot faster way to get your software. We also have what we call an LPAR process. You can get an exemption to the $2 million limit there. If you need to spend more than that, we do grant those. We have our statewide commodity contracts. This is where most of the hardware comes through, your desktop goods, servers, storage. And then I don't think the rest of that really applies very much here. So let me talk about one other program that matters probably to you. That's the State Financial Marketplace. This is sometimes referred to as GS Smart. From time to time, depending on your department's finances, you may or may not have the cash to actually pay for some of your major purchases all at once. You can then, if that's the case, go get financing through what's called the GS Smart program. It's a program that brings in third-party lenders that actually will carry the cost of your acquisition and finance it over the life of the asset. So it could be, we go out, probably the longest we go out is about 7 years for most of the IT goods that we buy. But it's a terrific way to extend your budget if you're tight and you have a really big purchase. So let me stop there and see if there are questions. Last one, I got to talk about our small business program. The fastest way to buy something in the state, other than just buying off of a pre-source contract, is to use the small business option. It's only good for purchases up to $250,000, but if you have small projects, you just want to get them done. We have over 21,000 certified small businesses in the state. Those include DVBEs too. Several thousand of those are IT contractors, and it's a really great way to go source some really great local talent on projects in a very quick way. And I can't recommend it more. You only have to get 2 quotes, and you can award. A small business offer can be done in a day. If you know what you want to buy and get your game going, you can write it up, put it out, get the quotes. Might take you 2 or 3 more days to get responses in. Within a week, you could have something awarded. It's a really powerful tool. So with that, let me stop and see if there are questions for me about any of our programs. Please, your name and your question.
Yes, I'm Marie Harder. I work for CDPH. I'm a little concerned about working on allowing CMAS to go up to 1.5 million, since it's a largely unpoliced program that has had a lot of issues with departments not really adhering to Government Code 19130. And it seems like if the limit is increased, it's just right for more misuse.
Thank you. So I'll repeat the question for those who couldn't hear, but there are concerns with how well DGS and other departments may be following California law. And the law that you mentioned is the Public Contract Code 19130, which relates to outsourcing and buying services that can otherwise be provided in the state. So I think that's a very reasonable and important concern. As part of that, every department, when they perform their CMS, has to actually conduct what's called the 19130 certification. They have to actually make a declaration that the services they want to buy cannot be provided within the civil service. And under 19130, there's, I think, 11 different categories that they can claim, but that is really up to the department to make that claim. And the state has done a number of things in the last 3 years to really prevent a lot of inappropriate outsourcing from happening. The most recent one is that today all services contracts of any kind, whether they're IT or non-IT services, have to be noticed to the appropriate labor union before the award can be made. And I think that that's a very helpful law. And all departments, are any of you in the business of notifying unions, by the way? I see a few hands go up. And so I don't know if those protections are sufficient. That's really kind of the role of the legislature and the government to make that decision. But we are following those laws. I think they do give some protection. But thank you. Other questions, comments? All right, let me turn the time back over to Graham.
Thanks very much, Jen.